And it's bringing up another question, and it's kind of a question. It's kind of a statement in reference to the things I've been learning about your work and just my general understanding about how different psychoactive substances affect our sort of baseline mental health, which is that it would explain how some people would be going about their life pretty much regular, for the most part, you know, in a good negotiation with the way things are, balancing health in some sense. And then all of a sudden they develop like a full-blown psychosis or schizophrenia for the rest of their life. And one of the triggering effects was, say, chronic cannabis use, or a strong psychedelic experience, or even just a strong traumatic experience in some way. And when I was researching your work, you had mentioned that there's actually a genetic variant that increases the likelihood that cannabis would bring on issues with psychosis and schizophrenia. Am I correct in remembering that?
Yeah, there is. And this is one of the most interesting things that I found as someone who's been, pro cannabis, and generally, when I was younger, thinking that everyone should be smoking weed because the world would be a better place, everyone would be chiller and all that. But really, diving into the research, I think there's a small subset of people that are more prone to have, psychotic type reactions. There's two genes, and they show up in the dopamine system that have been really pretty well studied. There's one called AKT1 that has to do with dopamine signaling, and there's one called DRD2 that has to do with dopamine receptors. And when you kind of look at those two together, there seems to be pretty high correlation to people that develop. So there's these two genes called AKT1 and DRD2, and AKT1 has to do with dopamine transmission and signaling, while the DRD2 gene has to do with the receptor itself. And when you look at these two in combination, they found that there's a pretty high correlation to likelihood for development of schizophrenia or other psychotic type symptoms with cannabis use, where people with these certain variants, the more that they carry in these genes, the higher likelihood. And I think the study was looking at like an 8-fold difference or so. But when they were looking at history and looking at people that carried those variants, those risk variants, but had never smoked weed, the rate of schizophrenia or psychotic symptoms was like almost zero, like very low. So it seems that in certain people, it acts as a little bit of a trigger type thing. And, that's like I've done some genetic reads for some parents about that with like their kids, just like wondering, is this something that is safe in the long run? And that's one of the more powerful, I think, uses for this type of tool as a screening thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking about that insofar as screening people for something like psychedelic therapy. I mean, currently they screen people and say, do you have a history of mental illness or in your family? And if the answer is yes, the above ground research is like, okay, well, nope, unless, the history is depression, because obviously they're trying to treat that. But it might be more interesting to see us moving towards like, okay, well, you get your genome mapped, and then they can ask you these questions, but they already kind of know the answer on a biological level. It sort of like, it helps reduce the risk, because in some sense you are still gambling, because you never really know how things are going to subjectively affect you, even if there's a common recognition that a certain amount or a certain quality or a certain strain or whatever is a certain way. We have all these, like, as I'm learning now from you, all these incredible genetic differences that could make a wide range of things, from being able to like smoke weed all day and function, to like smoking one joint and having a complete panic attack and then being unable to get anything done for the next 3 days because you're just moving through like a jittery fog.
Right, exactly. And I think that's really one of the powerful things that this information is going to allow for going forward, is that very specific, tailored approach to like really getting to the place where like no one gets left behind in these type of pharmacological interventions.